Hello, Patreons from around the world. I was trying to be like Jeremy, but what's going on, everyone? Brian Masterson, Jeremy Alexum, Erik Kothen flies for a major airline. We're here to talk about aviation, stratospheres, autopilot, drones. Probably going to hit on that subject. So thanks for being here as always. Thanks for the support, and let's get into it. Erik, the whole reason we brought you in is because we were having a conversation about airplanes that one day, off camera, obviously. And I was like, do they still have ashtrays in some of the planes? And you said, yeah, they do. And then we went down this whole rabbit hole.
Oh, man.
We went down this whole rabbit hole, and I think that it just started like, I fly pretty frequently. You're flying how many days a week? 4?
Yeah, about 4.
Wow.
Do you ever get nervous? Because if I'm sitting in a plane that has ashtrays from the 70s or 80s, how is that still mechanically safe?
Well, number one, the ashtray is not mechanically connected.
Well, I know.
It's just a little thing that you open up and you can dispense ash in.
Really?
That's it. That's all it is.
But, doesn't that shows me, like, all right, this hasn't been updated in quite a while.
Well, you have to remember that, when a manufacturer builds an airplane, they don't just build it to sell it in the United States. I mean, that's capitalism. You want to sell it worldwide. We banned smoking in the U.S. when I was a little kid, but you're over in Vietnam, man, you probably still smoke until a few years ago when you're flying around. I'm not sure about that, but certainly it's a possibility that other countries would still let you smoke in their airplanes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you fly in from Nashville to Atlanta, right? Every Tuesday, Monday?
I usually work Wednesday to Saturday, so I fly Wednesday morning, come home Saturday afternoon.
What kind of plane are you flying? Typically, when you get into Atlanta, you get on what, and then where are you flying to? And what is it?
Well, the particular airplane I fly is called a McDonnell Douglas MD-88. It's a fairly old airplane. We've had them at Delta since 87 or 88 is when we started buying them, and we're getting ready to retire them all in the next couple years.
So you're driving one of the older ones?
Yeah, old and loud. Yeah.
And,
a lot of personality that plane has.
Yeah. And we were joking right before we started. I'm like, typically what? Fine, you're just pushing autopilot and sitting back having a cup of coffee?
Well, I mean...
and you said absolutely not.
No.
Well, I mean, obviously as a pilot... flying is just one very small aspect of what you actually do. You're the captain of a ship.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So obviously you have to be somewhat in control of what's happening throughout the ship. There's a lot of things that transpire on an airplane, as you know from these YouTube videos that come out with passenger misconduct.
Yeah.
Managing different personalities of the employees that you work with, that you oversee. There's a lot of legalities involved in flying to make sure the flight's actually legal to go. So a lot of what I do before the flight.
Okay.
Pre-flight, a lot of preparation for what the next segment of the flight will be. So, when we're on the ground, mostly as long as there's no issues outside the airplane or with passengers or whatever, I'm up in the airplane making sure that equipment on the airplane is airworthy, ready for the flight, making sure that the airport and the airport I'm going to and any alternate airport I may need to have, that the weather's good, that the equipment at the airport works properly. If you get to an airport and the weather's bad and you would need some equipment to help you land, if that's inoperative, that would be a big problem, especially if, we don't carry a lot of extra fuel because the more weight an airplane has on it, the less fuel efficient it is.
Sure.
So we don't carry a lot.
Where's that fine line, though? Because let's not fill it up too much, but you have to have enough to get to where you're going.
Right, and that's all regulated by the government.
Okay.
That's all regulated by the government, and then, of course, if I feel the need to carry some extra fuel just for situations that might arise in flight that I may be aware of, or if the dispatcher feels that we need more fuel, we'll take some extra fuel. Mm-hmm. And then we also look at the fuel prices at the airport we're going to.
Okay.
If we get a good deal in fuel in Atlanta, Until recently, we got very good tax breaks from the state to buy our fuel in Atlanta. So a lot of airports, that had, high fuel taxes or high fuel prices, we would just tanker fuel.
Got it.
Because it was more cost effective for us to do so.
When did you start flying? Like, how long have you been doing it?
I think I took my first flight in November of '99.
Wow. So coming up on 20 years.
Yeah, I guess
Congrats.
it is. Yeah. And I've been at Delta for 11. So
Congrats.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So one thing that we like looking at here in any industry is the advancement of the technology in the space. So from 99 to date, have you seen any like enhancements, whether it's communicational aspects when you're talking with the tower or landing gears, or I don't even know where the hell to start, but
yeah, I mean, there's been tremendous amounts of technology advances. Unfortunately, myself, the airplanes I've flown have not embraced that technology.
Yeah.
And so I'm not completely abreast as to the newest technology, but we have, obviously, GPS was developed, I believe, in the 60s and 70s. GPS has been probably the greatest advancement for us. Because it's extremely accurate, and it has very few errors associated with it, and it allows us to fly closer together. Before you had just kind of radios and
hey, I see you over there. Don't come.
Yeah, and it's and so the spacing of aircraft, we used to have to fly very far away from each other because. Sure. You had to build in the safety zone for the inaccuracy of the equipment you're navigating with.
Oh, okay.
With GPS, it's so accurate that we're able to fly closer together because that inaccuracy is so tight that it and of course tighter spacing means more volume of airplanes.
Right. Aerospace efficiency. More planes, more money, more people flying.
Yeah.
Atlanta is probably one of the greatest examples of it. Atlanta is the air traffic controllers there, the airspace. It's so well designed, and they do such a great job getting us in and out of that airport, and that's why Delta is able to do the volume of traffic it does in Atlanta, which is the world's busiest airport.
Sure. It's because why?
It's because
of the efficiency of the GPS and stuff.
Well, there's a multitude of reasons. The efficiency of the design of the airspace. So someone has to design the airspace. It's a three-dimensional.
Yeah, so we discussed this in our drone interview. Remember the three-dimensional? It's not just like it is on a street. You have to incorporate the altitude, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's
the z-axis.
Yes, exactly. And so, someone has to design that airspace to work efficiently. If a storm blocks an entryway, they've got to have different ways to get in there designed.
I can't. That's crazy to think about. Like. If you're, because I can just see it now. If there's a storm, you have to go this way and then come back down in that way.
Yeah, I mean, if you can imagine, there's arrivals from every direction, and what they do is they funnel all the arrivals into a couple of points, like 4 points surrounding the airport, and then they meter them in, so we have like 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 miles spacing in between each one of us. And we just kind of come in and hit points and then fly downwind and then base and then final and land. And we're all just in unison. Mm-hmm. So if one storm blocks that, it cuts off a major thoroughfare of traffic. And not only that, but they have to get people launching out of Atlanta up into
the storm,
up into the sky. And we're coming down, they're going up, so how do you not cross paths? I mean, the design of the airspace is amazing, and the efficiency of it is great. And it's gotten more and more efficient, obviously due to technology, due to, us evolving and getting smarter in aerospace, and really, the cooperation between the FAA and Delta and other airlines. It's also a testament to the great work that Delta Airlines does with the government. The FAA in Atlanta is they're a fantastic group because, a lot, as you know, and as most of us know, when you're working with the government, sometimes it's like, well, we're the government, it's our way or the highway. Right. We don't really care.
Right.
Well, that's not the case in Atlanta with the FAA. They are fantastic to work with. They do a great job of getting together with Delta and saying, how can we make this better? And they just do a great job.
I didn't even think about that. Like a storm blocks one area, and now you have all these different. That's insane.
Have you seen that video? I'm sure you have. Have you seen the video where they...
The time lapse?
Yeah, the time lapse of Atlanta.
It was a California airport. I think it was LAX. The time lapse of the plane just coming in and going out, coming in, going out.
Right.
I mean, when you're watching the time lapse, when you're watching it like real time, you're just like, oh, there goes a plane. Okay, there goes a plane. But that time lapse, I'm like, you have to be very efficient with monitoring all that.
It's amazing how they call it pushing 10, and it's amazing how much 10 they can push there, and even when the weather's bad. Pushing
That's
10,
hilarious.
So another thing that's interesting is when you look at like a flight map of the United States and you look at the airspace. If you look at New York airspace, I mean, like out west, there's just a couple of planes speckling the map.
Wider.
And if you look at New York, it's like
Convergence.
there's a ton of airplanes up there, and obviously New York does a great job too because it's a.
So Eric, do you have a team of people? Like you mentioned a team. Do you have employees or people that you manage?
Well, I don't personally have any employees.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're, there's a structure to how the airplane. Someone has to be in charge.
Sure.
So that's the captain.
Sure.
So he's in charge of the airplane. He's in charge of what transpires on the airplane. He's in charge of executing the flight. So before every flight, I have a dispatch release that I sign that says that I've looked over all the information.
Wow.
And that I deem that this flight is safe to go. So I sign off on it, and then it stays wherever I am, and then we conduct the flight. And so, there's very few places where the buck stops with someone, because everyone can place blame or shift blame, even all the way up to CEOs now. But the captain is truly the final authority on the flight, and the buck stops with him.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So
you referenced the plane as a ship. So is there a lot of maritime law that transfers over into the flight or into the air?
Good question.
That's a great question, and the answer to that is yeah. I mean,
port side, starboard.
Yeah, I mean,
do you use port side and starboard?
I mean, not so much in the civilian world, but a lot of the military pilots will use that, especially in the Navy,
That's crazy.
Or the Marine Corps. But I say left wing or right wing, but you could say that, and we would know what you were talking about.
So this is going to be a personal question.
Okay.
This is something that I've noticed, but maybe I'm just totally off. I've never seen a pilot with a beard. Why is that?
That's another great question. The reason is we're not allowed.
Okay.
And so what happens is in an emergency situation, we have an oxygen mask, and it has to be a quick donning oxygen mask. And so if I grab my oxygen, if we have a rapid depressurization.
That's a great question. I didn't even think about it.
If we have a rapid depressurization, I've got to be able to don my oxygen mask quickly.
Don?
It's called donning.
Okay.
I have to don it, and it has to seal properly. And supposedly, I don't know this for a fact, but supposedly if you have a beard or facial hair, it will not seal properly.
Yeah, if you have he had a huge beard. If you have a huge, remember that? When
that was ridiculous.
He had it was just stupid down here.
ZZ Top type thing?
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
But I'm sure you couldn't seal anything with that.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, so now that's both you and your co-pilot.
Yeah, and so obviously we're limited. The amount of time that we have oxygen, we're limited because it's a tank. So we have to check that before every flight to make sure that it's got enough pressure and that it's turned on. And then if we were to put that on our beard and oxygen would be escaping, you're wasting. Yeah. It's not efficient. So you may go from 14 minutes of oxygen to less because it's and it's actually I believe it's called a diluter demand mask. So we can actually take it to force 100% oxygen into our lungs.
Jeez.
So and that's another misconception that I hate to get off on a tangent.
No, that's fine.
But there's the same amount of oxygen at 20,000 feet as there is at sea level. The same percentage of oxygen is in the atmosphere. It's not a lack of oxygen that would kill you. It's a lack of air pressure forcing the oxygen into your body.
So it's almost like you would be suffocating.
Yeah, I mean, the oxygen percentage would be the same in the atmosphere. It just wouldn't be forcing it
Yeah.
into your body.
Yeah, because where it's at. Makes sense.
Right, because at sea level, it's like 14.7 pounds per square inch of pressure.
As
you get higher, there's less pressure to force that into your lungs.
Now, another random question. I always think in my head, co-pilot's on the right of the plane and the pilot's on the left side of the plane, like the captain. Is that correct?
That's correct. We call it captain and first officer.
Okay.
And when I was a first officer, I used to get so upset with people because it'd be like, well, are you the pilot or the co-pilot? And I'm like, I fly.
I would never ask.
So we swap legs.
Well, I mean, like on a plane, I wouldn't be like, wait a minute, are you the co-pilot?
I just say nice job, guys, if they did a good job landing.
Exactly. Yeah. And contrary to belief, we all have bad landings.
I know.
And we all have good landings.
I don't say anything. If it's a shit landing and I almost like crack my neck, I don't say anything. I'm just like, thank God we're here.
Yeah.
But if it's a good, smooth landing, I typically say nice job.
We basically say, hey, if we can reuse the airplane, it was a good landing.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean,
I hear you.
Now, I see when I'm coming out of the plane, I see just hundreds of buttons.
Yes.
How many different things can they do?
Well, obviously some of these modern airplanes that you guys were mentioning that I've never had the privilege to fly yet, I'm looking forward to it. There a lot of the buttons say auto on them on the newer airplanes, and that means you just put it in auto, and if something happens with the system and it needs to change to a backup system or whatever, or a valve needs to open, in the old days, in the plane I fly, you have to manually do that. And each button has a limitation associated with it, like a pressure that it needs to be at or whatever. So when you flip a button, you're also checking, like if you're turning on a generator, you're checking the volts and frequencies of it before you turn it on. I mean, it's just, there's those buttons. So there's not only that many buttons, but there's so many limitations associated with them. It's extremely complex. And
how many steps would you say there is in your? I mean, because is it like riding a bike now that you know how to do it now? Like where you're just like boom, boom, check. But how many steps is that?
It's
a dozen.
Well, on my airplane, there's we have several checklists depending on the phase of flight, but there could be 30 steps involved in the process. And thankfully for me, I'm the captain. So usually the co-pilot's
flipping it. You're just saying, do this.
And I just verify that he's done it and say check or set or whatever.
Right.
Nice.
So much easier for me in that regard. It's very...
So, at the pilot of a plane, what's your number one concern? Is it because it's not really weather? Weather doesn't really.
Well, weather is a huge concern because weather has brought down a lot of airplanes.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Is it wind or electricity, like lightning?
Well,
rain or snow.
Lightning is scary for two reasons. One, there's the potential for fire. Mm-hmm. Number two, there's the potential to lose systems. Mm-hmm. You can fry a lot of your electrical systems that in airplanes rely a lot on electricity to operate. So that's one thing. Lightning hasn't been a factor to me, but winds and storms are a huge factor, and wind shear and microburst have brought down a lot of airplanes.
What are wind shears and microbursts?
So your airplane, we have like 4 or 5 different air speeds. In your car, you're going 65 miles an hour. Well, in an airplane, we have several different speeds, and the one we care the most about is how fast the airplane thinks it's going. Okay? So, of course, everyone knows what ground speed is. That's how fast you're actually going across the ground.
Right.
And let's say your airplane is going 400 knots, or we'll say miles per hour. Let's say you're going into a 100-knot headwind. Well, you're basically going about 300 miles an hour. Right. Now let's say it's a 100-knot tailwind. Now you're going 500 miles an hour. So that's your ground speed sort of thing. We have indicated airspeed, which is how fast the plane thinks it's going. Too fast and You could go your aircraft. The wings could lose lift because there's a pressure underneath the wings once you get going a certain speed, and that's how it flies. Very rough, generally speaking. And if it moves too far aft, it could go past the wing, and you could go out of control. If you're going too slow, then you'll no longer create enough pressure to keep the airplane in the air, and you'll stall. And so we really care about indicated airspeed. So imagine if you're flying an approach or you're about to land and you're going fairly slow. You're very close to your stall speed when you land, okay? And you're coming in and you have a nice 20-knot headwind, right? And so your airplane thinks it's going 150, which is what speed you need to be on. Well, all of a sudden the wind shears from behind. That 20-knot headwind you had is now a 20-knot tailwind.
So you're at 170.
No. You're at 110. You were going 150. You lost 40 knots. 150 minus 40. Now your plane thinks you're going 110, and now you're so slow you're going to stall.
Well, Okay.
So wind shear
is that when you usually hear the?
Yeah, I mean we're constantly, when
During
it's gusty
landing?
out. Yeah, well, when you hear it spool up really loud, that's usually after we've dropped the landing gear and put the landing flaps down because that creates a lot of drag. So now we have to add power to overcompensate for that drag.
Got it.
But when it's really windy out, the engines, we're constantly adjusting the power to maintain an airspeed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you hit a wind shear, which is simply just wind shifting directions or wind going slower than it was before or a combination of both, we're constantly adjusting to maintain a safe speed for us to land at. And a microburst is a extreme downdraft. And so when you have an extreme downdraft that comes down and hits the ground, it spreads out like a mushroom, like an upside-down mushroom cloud kind of, in all these different directions. So if you're flying and this downdraft occurs and blows a huge amount of wind at you, all of a sudden your airspeed will increase dramatically because of that increased headwind. So now you're pulling the power back. Now you hit the downdraft, it tries to force you towards the ground.
Yeah.
And you've pulled the power back. Now, my airplane's pretty old, and it takes about 8 to 10 seconds when I add power for that power to become available. So imagine putting the gas on in your car, and nothing happens for 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So now I'm adjusting the power back up because I had to pull it back to maintain an airspeed. Now I have a downdraft pushing me on the ground. Now I'm coming to the other side of the mushroom cloud where the wind is now behind me. So now I'm not only getting pushed in the ground, but now I've lost all that performance because the wind is behind me now. So you can see how that would be a dangerous situation.
Sure.
So, you kind of, you learn how to deal with that through experience, through errors of other pilots, how they mishandled it. So weather, long story short, weather is a huge factor. And we also worry about contaminated runways. You landed on 2 inches of snow.
Oh, yeah.
That creates
It's gonna change it, yeah.
Yeah, it creates a slick surface, and certainly that an airplane is not a very maneuverable thing on the ground,
Right.
and so you can land and lose control laterally, or you could just not be able to brake effectively, and it would take you too long to stop.
Sure.
So weather is definitely a huge concern for us. That's one of the things I pay the most attention to before I leave.
So obviously weather sounds terrible, but it
Intense.
sounds like if it's a nice day and everything, beautiful. But what was the scariest moment you've ever had?
Well, it's all been cupcakes and rainbows.
Cupcakes and rainbows.
Yeah.
in the
Absolutely.
in the
all
old
been
ship.
perfect.
In the
That's
old
it,
ship
man.
too.
It's all been perfect.
It's all, every day I go to work is a blessing. It's great. It's
That's
a lot of
nice.
fun, and
I love it.
Yeah.
So what's in the next technological improvement or future that you see in aerospace? Do you see like private planes?
Or what's needed? What
or
do you
what's
think's
needed,
next,
yeah.
or what do you think's what's needed?
Well, I mean, certainly we need to get better at efficiency in the airspace. Like I said, there's been a lot of advancements. We're doing a great job. but we need to continue that. As the world's population grows, there's only going to be more people flying.
Yeah.
So we're combating that. There's a huge pilot shortage right now.
Really?
Yeah. It went from when I got into it, I had to call and beg for a job. Everybody.
Really?
And we used to joke that unless you had a lunar landing or were a general or an admiral, you didn't get hired at Delta.
Lunar landing.
Yeah. So that was the joke. And now it's like, well, I mean,
don't have enough.
People just aren't coming into aviation because it's so expensive to do it from a civilian standpoint.
Really?
Yeah.
Like the training and stuff?
Yeah, where I went to college, you're going to be in a huge amount of debt. You're going to amount a massive amount of debt. And it used to be, your first year flying as a co-pilot at a regional airline, which is the smaller feeder airlines, you'd make like $24,000. And no one wants to spend that much money to make that little amount.
Right.
And now it's been lucrative for me. I've been very, very lucky and fortunate in my career. But it's not like that for everyone. And so people just lost interest. And then aviation doesn't, it's just not as sexy as it used to be.
I remember Catch Me If You Can.
Of course.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
And pilots were signing autographs and everything. So what are they doing now?
Change that. Because you are right. It's no longer sexy.
They need to bring sexy back. Yeah. I mean, who was that? Justin Timberlake?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. I mean, he said it best. That's what we need to do in the airline industry. Unfortunately, it's hard for us because in America, we have different, we have a higher standard, a higher code of ethics. And, we're not going to get rid of, we've all been on the airplanes with the older flight attendants or whatever. And, and you look at these commercials in the Korean carriers or the Middle Eastern carriers with, if you're 25, you're too old, you're gone. You get married, you're gone. You get pregnant, you're gone. Wow. In the U.S., we have a different way of thinking about the value of a human being and what they can bring to the table. And a lot of our more seasoned flight attendants, they just do a great job, and their experience is invaluable. So in that regard, we're probably not going to bring sexy back to the way it was in the 60s and 70s in the aviation industry. But, just improving our customer service and improving just the overall customer's experience. It doesn't have to be sexual in nature. It just has to be superior in nature.
Right.
And that's what we have to do better at.
If Delta or Southwest or whoever's looking for new pilots, would a new pilot, and I know nothing about the aviation world, do you go to like a typical state school and learn aviation, or can you go to your local airport? Like, what do you? How do you learn?
How do you get your degree in pilot?
Or do you get a license, a pilot license, or can you get a degree which transfers into a license?
Well, so there's several ways to do it. Obviously, you can go in the military. So the military, you just get a 4-year degree. You go in as an officer. You get a flight training spot. You do well, and you fly in the military, and it's about a 10-year commitment now. Once you get your wings, I believe, to fly in the military.
Damn.
So you're like, 32 to 34 years old when you get out of the military and are ready to go to a major airline. If you do the civilian world, you can just go down to the small little airport, find a little flight school, and there's obviously a lot of regulations that govern it, and then you get a private pilot's license. You add on your instrument rating, which allows you to fly in bad weather or without any reference to the horizon. Then you would get like a multi-engine rating, which allows you to fly something with 2 engines on it. And then you'd get a commercial pilot certificate once you get on that, which allows you to fly for hire. And then maybe a flight instructor certificate, because just because you have a license that says you're allowed to fly for hire, you're not going to be able to get insured to fly any expensive airplanes, and no one's certainly going to trust you to fly an airplane with just that piece of paper.
Let's come back to the commercial pilot license. But I was going to ask this earlier, and I just assumed. That's why no stupid question is a stupid question.
It's true.
There isn't one, yeah.
Because I was going to ask, and I thought obviously you're insured through your company, but you have to get your own insurance?
No.
Oh, so I was right.
No, yeah, right. But
well, you don't, but someone else would.
Yes, someone would have to get insurance.
If they're doing it.
Delta wouldn't hire me if I just got my commercial license because they don't want to insure me.
Right, because you're just not. You're just not qualified enough. Just because you have a certificate doesn't mean much.
Are those the guys? Those are the guys flying the private jets, the commercial guys. Who
no,
just got the commercial license?
no. Those are the like your flight instructor. We used to have a lot. Back when you had checks that had to get flown throughout the night, you would get a job flying on some beat up old airplane through the night to fly canceled checks, and
like the actual checks,
like a big bag of checks. You would fly. I never did this, but I had friends that did this. And I mean, you just get in an old airplane and fly checks in the middle of the night to other cities and drop them off, and they'd take them to the bank or whatever. I mean, it's amazing how inefficient.
Why can't you use the U.S. Postal Service?
Well, I mean,
that's how they move packages from.
You have to do it overnight. I mean, it's
overnight is flying.
Yeah,
dude.
I mean that's just the way it was.
Thinking about that.
That industry is gone. I don't even know if it still exists because of technology.
Shoot, well, I was gonna say that's a whole other industry though, is because you have like air freight.
Yeah,
which is literally just someone who's because that happens all the time, right?
Huge.
That's a huge industry.
And I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but those guys who are doing huge FedEx and UPS flights international are getting paid big bucks.
Oh yeah, they're doing great. I mean, of course, that takes a toll on your body flying at night. Obviously, unless you're a night owl or your body's accustomed to that, that can be taxing on one's body.
Sure.
But those guys do a great job. It's a very good pilot group, FedEx and UPS.
I mean, how do you practice not going to sleep? Because anytime I get on an airplane, it's like this natural, like I just get tired like immediately. But as a pilot, you have to be, sharp the entire flight. I feel like
black coffee.
I mean, obviously coffee, but I think you give yourself tasks to do.
Okay.
I mean, there's always something that can be done.
So you're just more of a badass than I am, is what you're saying, in a nice way.
No, no, not at all. It's just that's my job.
Sure.
Sure. And
wow.
It's just like anybody else's job. You do a professional job.
You have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean, if you're in a professional world,
right,
you do a professional job.
Right.
That's just the way it is.
Here's a crazy question: at night or during the day, have you ever seen any crazy shit flying around? Any UFOs or anything?
Oh, UFO question. Finally.
No, I have not seen anything like that. Now, I did find it interesting. It's been years and years and years, but we have a little manual that's published by the FAA, and it's called the Airman's Information Manual.
Okay, so this is just like a little booklet.
It's just a little booklet
from the government.
Why'd you pull it out of your back pocket?
Because I feel like it would be a back pocket booklet.
And it gives pilots just some general information about things. And there was a paragraph in there: if you see any extraterrestrial activity, and it had a phone number to call.
No,
I'm not even kidding. I bet you it's still in there.
I wish get that number.
Yeah, well, maybe on another podcast you can flash it up. By the way, just on our just an update from the old past. Here's the phone number.
There has to be some crazy shit out there, but we don't need a tangent line down an alien podcast.
Yeah, I personally have not had the privilege.
And now, have you seen like any drones or any aircrafts where and how has that affected aviation with the advancement of drones? Because I feel like the FAA regulates drone flyers, right?
Big time.
So they want to allow for the drones to operate, but have you found any problems with the pickup of drones flying around?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a drone poses an extreme threat to an airplane.
Hell yeah.
And it's something that I have thought about quite a bit. And I've actually seen drones when I've been landing, especially in like New York airspace.
Jesus.
Southwest hit one.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't. It caused a huge dent in the airplane.
Yeah, but if that went in an engine.
Yeah, that would probably destroy that engine. And of course you have two, sometimes four. And we can safely fly on one.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
still,
it needs to be regulated, and it needs to be. As much as I hate to say that, because I'm like the guy that wants almost no rules, but it needs to be regulated because you just don't want 12-year-old Bobby
Yeah.
flying a drone right up into the final approach for LaGuardia.
What are you doing, Bobby?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some drones are building in, like Mark was telling us, they build in a sensor where they know where the
GPS
space
sensors.
is.
Yeah,
and it just cuts it off and won't allow it to go up there.
Absolutely, and that's great because we have the technology. I mean, you can hit a button on a drone and come back and land right in front of your feet. So we have the technology to limit it.
Yeah.
Certainly, with as much memory as you can store on a small space, I mean, you could actually upload like the airspace onto a drone and prevent it from flying into airspace it shouldn't be in.
Sure.
So, that technology is either out there or will be out there, and so that's pretty. Rest assured that's reassuring for me because I don't want to be trucking on in with 160 people on the plane and jeopardize them by some 12-year-old with a drone. So I don't.
Question I forgot to ask earlier: why is Atlanta the busiest airport?
Why?
Yeah. I would feel like New York or Chicago or LAX.
Well, I mean, we're the busiest airport by passenger volume. Where we're located in the United States, globally, if you think about it, the United States holds something about 80% of all air travel.
That's
so
crazy.
we control a massive resource.
That's huge.
And that's just because that's the way we designed our country. We put highways in, trains kind of came and went, and now it's aviation. That's how we get to where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Which is weird because in Europe, I mean, you got the Europass, and I feel like
they do a lot of trains.
Trains out the ass over there.
They do a lot of trains. They do a lot of flights too.
Yeah, and they developed that infrastructure. That's what they went with in America. I'm very happy that we chose, the highway system and aviation as our major forms of transportation. Of course, back in the olden days, trains were very reliable, and there was But now, we're mostly aviation, and we control most of the world's aviation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's a huge part of our economy. And, and that's another thing that's right. We've got politicians that want to give up. It's like oil. It's a commodity. Our aviation industry is a commodity. And, there are people, and there's foreign lobbyists and people that are trying to influence the government to give up that commodity and allow them to fly interstate.
So you're saying there's lobbyists to privatize the sector of aviation?
There's people that want to allow foreign carriers to operate U.S. domestic flights. And
what's your opinion on that?
Oh, I think it's a terrible idea. I mean, it's essentially the equivalent to Saudi Arabia saying, "Here, America, here's our natural resource, oil. You go ahead and pull all of what you want, and that's it. No fees, no nothing. Just come in and take our oil." See, to me, aviation is such a big part of the U.S. economy. It's so built into it. It's just like a natural resource. And why would we want to allow a foreign carrier to come in and
be able to transport back and forth? Yeah,
exactly. So they can fly from one port to a foreign port.
Sure, that's
or
one
they
thing.
can fly to New York and go to San Diego. They just can't pick up passengers in New York and take them to San Diego. So they're not allowed to fly within the United States.
I hear.
Unless they're going from New York to Vancouver.
Right.
Vancouver down to LAX.
Yeah. Something like that. Right. Makes sense.
So,
have you ever flown international?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that taxing?
Yeah, I gained about 20 pounds. It wasn't for me. I mean, I loved going all over Europe and South America and seeing all that, but I gained about 20 pounds, and I just didn't sleep well. Unless you sleep well on airplanes, and because we have a break, not sleeping in the cockpit. There's 3 of us, and we'll rotate out. 2 will always be in the cockpit.
Good.
Yeah. But unless you sleep well on an airplane, or you do well with time zone changes, it's just not for you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, the question I think everyone has on their mind is why the hell do we have to put our phones in airplane mode?
The simple answer is we don't know what effect your radio antennas will have on our airplane.
I knew it. There had to be something with the radio. I thought everyone was just like...
It's not that it does. Okay? I want to be clear about that. It's that we don't know. So we have to err on the side of conservatism. And we have to say, until there's enough data to support that these radios won't interfere with our navigational or communication radios, we can't allow it. Sure. And so the FAA's position...
How do you allow for Wi-Fi then?
Well,
different
because...
signal.
Well, and not only that, but there was enough money in selling Wi-Fi to passengers to support a study to be done on its effects. There is no... I mean, what are we going to do? Charge you to use your cell phone in the air? Or attempt... I mean, because the reality of it is someone would have to pour a lot of money to do the R&I, or the research, into the effects of a cell phone signal on an airplane's navigation and communication radios. And what is I mean, are they going to get paid back for that research? You know, I don't think so. So I don't until there's enough data. Yeah. And I don't know who's going to pay to collect the data. I
feel like it would be one of the major cell phone companies because
you can't get service up there anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Right. So also,
that's another reason. Why can't you get service?
Well, because you're so far above the tower.
Yeah, I mean, until once you get to like 10,000 feet, I doubt you're going to have a signal anyway. So below 10,000 feet,
maybe
you're really not supposed. You're not supposed to use your electronic devices anyway. You know, you're. Do I gotta watch out for you?
No.
Remember to add Brian Masterson to the no-fly list, please.
No-fly zone. I do have one final question for me, and this goes back to like the maritime law question that he was asking, kind of like the international waters, like. So when you're flying and you're up in the air, do you think that gambling will be ever added to airplanes, like a cruise ship will? Because, I mean, up there no one owns that aerospace. So, I mean, they have entertainment now. Will it ever be roulette wheels or crap tables or something?
You know, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think that, you know, there's been a lot of niche airlines out there that, you know, like Hooters Air.
What? No.
Yeah.
You didn't know about Hooters Air?
Oh, my
God. The best part about Hooters Air was that the Hooters girls weren't actually trained flight attendants. They actually had to have real flight attendants, and then the Hooters girl on board the airplanes. But
my goodness, I had
never heard of Hooters.
Never.
Yeah, they had orange jets. It was
hell yeah.
It was
so it didn't work.
No, I mean there's been huge niche airlines out there. I mean honestly, I don't know that we'd ever see that, but that doesn't mean that it
can't
happen. Yeah,
someone's flying from Atlanta to Colorado or Denver, let's say, and in between that flight, there's a crime committed on the airplane. Is what law? What, is it federal?
Yeah, it's all federal.
Okay.
Law. And interestingly enough, I know many of you and people do not like to listen to the flight attendants, or they think flight attendants are just being mean or snippety with them, but we're actually extremely regulated. Probably one of the most regulated and taxed industries that you'll ever find. And
except for
the flight attendants
3 years.
have the most, they have a difficult job because imagine all these people that don't think the rules apply to them on an airplane, and these flight attendants who don't have a badge or a firearm are sitting there telling you, sir, you need to stow that laptop in your bag. It can't go in the seat bag. Well, that's because the laptop weighs over a certain amount, and it can't be in a seat bag, according to the FAA. You know, oh, I'm sorry, you don't speak English, you can't sit in the extra row. Whatever it is.
Yeah, or you're too young.
They're not doing it to be mean. There's not
so many laws.
There's just, it's so regulated, and you never know if the FAA is on your airplane.
Yeah. Interesting.
You know, so an FAA representative could be on the airplane. And so these girls are putting their jobs at risk by not telling you. And so I know it's frustrating. I know there's a lot of rules, but please be easy on them.
Well, first of all, it's not that frustrating. People are assholes. I'm saying that for me. If a flight attendant asks me to do something, I'm like, yeah, no problem. Like sure. I'm gonna make your job. If this is your job to keep me safe, I'm thousands of feet in the air.
Yeah.
I'm going to listen to you.
Right.
No problem. I'll turn this off. I'll stow this. Not a big deal.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
right?
I have to be alone with my thoughts for 2 hours.
Yeah, be
Woe is
respectful.
me.
Huh.
Yeah.
I
pay for the
get,
Wi-Fi.
I truly don't believe. So I don't believe any of our passengers are ever assholes. I believe there's
I'm
passengers
allowed to
that are
say
having
that.
a bad day.
Sure.
I mean, they're running behind. Their Uber forgot to pick them up.
Yeah,
They get to the ticket counter and they're like, well, you're almost too late. We don't know if your bag's going to make it. So now they're stressed their bag's not going to make it. Then they got into the TSA line and that line was huge. And then the TSA guys were mean. They took their favorite cologne. Or they forgot they had a handgun in their bag. No, that's a really bad day. But by the time they get to the airplane, I mean, they faced about as much stress as a human being can be having a day. And that's no excuse. I just, I
can see your point. Yeah.
It's just people can have a very bad day,
Sure.
and they're just very stressed when they get on an airplane.
Sure.
And so I get it.
Sure.
It's just, be polite. People, please.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Well, dude, I have truly another 1,000 questions to ask, but I know we're running out of time. We're going to have you back on the show at some point. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'll get that alien number for you guys.
Yes.
We'll call it on the next podcast.
And
We'll call it.
Before we go, can you just put your glasses on for us so you look like a Iceman or Maverick?
Like a Tom Cruise, like a Maverick.
Yeah.
Bam.
Solid.
Hey, folks from around the world, this has been the IR4 Podcast. It's been an absolute honor.
Be nice to your pilots and your flight attendants.
That's
All
right.
right, guys, let's go shower, play some volleyball. See you on the court.
That's right. You guys are amazing. Until next time, love, live, learn. We'll see you next week. Bye.